I think we can make a start with the last topic of the day, which is an update on the current state on Article 57 implementation. So essentially, with my presentation, I'm going to give you a background and a bit of history of the Article 57, what has been going on since last meetings. And also, I'm going to present some deliverables that we've been achieving in the last few months. Together with this, I'm also sharing with you some data on Article 57, so some figures on the volume of the data that we are handling at the moment and receiving, and highlights on the next steps. So, as you well know by now, the implementation of the electronic submission of information on medicines is the first deliverable of the new pharmacovigilance legislation. Article 57 is essentially placing a responsibility on the agency to make public a format for the electronic submission of information on medicines for human use by 2nd of July 2011. The Article 57 also requires the marketing authorization holders to submit information to the agency electronically using the published format, information on all authorized medicinal products for human use, and this needs to be achieved by 2nd of July 2012. In addition to that, the third paragraph is also requiring the MAH to inform the agency of any new or varied marketing authorization granted in the EU as of 2nd of July 2012 using the published format. So just to refresh what the Article 57 implementation will bring, from an agency perspective, the implementation of Article 57 will really help in establishing the list of all medicinal products authorized in EU, and not only the centrally approved product, but especially the medicines that were authorized in the EU member states. This will strengthen the coordination of the safety monitoring and also the pharmacovigilance activities of medicines across EU. From the stakeholder perspective, these Article 57 data will help in identifying medicines, especially in the context of the reporting of medicine information in suspected adverse reactions. Together with this, we'll also facilitate all the harmonization activities which is happening at international level and especially in the context of ICH. So, as demanded by the Article 57, the agency published on the 1st July and 1st September last year a set of documents. The first one was the legal notice, that is essentially the document that is defining the format for the electronic submission, the format being the extended version of the Eurovigilance medicinal product report message. So the legal notice is describing and defining the content. The detailed guidance that was published is instead a more technical specification document and was made available again last year together with the XSD, so the XML schema definition, and also a set of control vocabularies for the structured substance information submission and business document on how to present the naming of substances in the structured substance information. So, following the publication of this set of documents and requirements, the agency received a set of concern and comments by the EU Pharmaceutical Industry Association. And these comments were mainly related to the short timeline that the company had to comply with the electronic submission requirements, and also the workload that was demanded. And there were also comments related to the content of the information that we've been asked. So in response to the concern that we received, the agency decided to organize a workshop with the EU Pharmaceutical Industry Association, and this was held at the end of January 2012. So the main objectives of the workshop was to address the industry's concern, but also to agree on a way forward to meet the 2nd of July 2012 deadline. So the agency made a proposal that was essentially to significantly reduce the mandatory data elements and content of data initially required in the format published in July 2011. And the stakeholders well received this proposal and they were supportive. So it's important to inform you that despite the fact that we reduce the data elements, which are mandatory, the key objective of maintaining the public health goal and also the patient safety are still valid and were not compromised. And on the other hand, from industry perspective, there was a significant reduction on the burden and also a substantial help in meeting the legal deadline of the 2nd of July 2012. So since the workshop with the industry, the agency had to update all the set of documents that we released in 2011. So since 5th of March, these are the main deliverables. So essentially, we've been making available the summary of the workshop, so the outcome of the workshop with the essentially the reduction and the content changes, as well as further guidance on how to get trained with the XEVMPD system and registered with it. We also made available a revised version of the legal notice and a revised version of the detailed guidance. And especially in the detailed guidance, we also published 2 new chapters. One was the chapter 3.2, where we were giving more business guidance on how to provide medicinal product information using the format, and also the chapter 3.3 that was related to some practical XEVPRM examples on how to submit this information. So another much important document that we made available was the question and answer, where we were addressing roughly 150 questions that we received up to March via the help desk, the Eurovigilance help desk. Another set of documents that we made public are some Excel files, which are the control vocabularies and terminology that support the transmission of the medicinal product information. And we also made available the new schema version. So an important deliverable was the XEVMPD web application. So this is essentially the data entry tool that was released in production on the 5th of March. And the data entry tool was initially designed for the small and medium enterprises, but it's also open for use to any other companies that wish to submit the data with this application. This was very important achievement. So most recently, in fact, last week, we made available the XEVMPD e-learning course. So this is essentially an electronic version of the training, which is now available through the Eurovigilance help desk, and it's completely for free. So essentially, the user can go in streaming and consult the training and get the training to get the registration to the system. So looking now at the data and the traffic we are dealing with. So in terms of number of organizations that are registered in the XEVMPD community, we have currently 512 headquarters and 183 affiliates. We also established new help desk line, which is the Article 57 emea.europa.eu, where we receive 891 queries since March, and we've been able to close 476 of them up to yesterday, actually. And what it is to be said here is that 415 queries are still open, so we are in progress to closing it. But what we are also working on is a new version of the question and answer document. So here, in essence, we will try to close also publishing a document that is addressing many of those open questions. So in terms of testing, together with the production environment, we also made available the testing environment, which is called XComp. And this to allow the companies that are essentially producing their messages with in-house tool to test beforehand and before going into production the compatibility of their system against our system. So as of the 23rd of May, there are 78 companies that are testing, and we've been receiving 1,400 XEVMPD messages, and 693 were loaded, which means were compatible with our system. Looking instead at the production data, so in terms of product presentation, up to the 23rd of May, we received 9,684 new product presentations, and 77 products were wrongly submitted as updates. So this figure is also giving us an indication of how accurate the kind of communication we've been given has been. I mean, in essence, this means that only few companies and few products have been submitted with the wrong procedures. So it means that our communication was clear. So we are going now to follow up with these 3 companies that are essentially submitting according with the wrong procedures to rectify the issue. So in terms of substance instead, we've been receiving 810 substance term in English and 63 new synonyms and roughly 3,000 translations. So these are the figures in production. So moving now, what's the next steps are? So the agency will continue work with the stakeholders to the 2012 in order to further define the requirements for the data maintenance and specifically to address the handling of variation and the data validation. There is also discussion that needs to happen to agree on a cooperative approach for the electronic submission of structured substance information. And also the implementation of the ISO IDMP standards needs to be discussed, as well as to agree on a set of internationally harmonized specifications for the unique identification of medicines. And in fact, in this last topic, which is the ISO IDMP standard implementation, in fact, eventually taking into account the international harmonization work, but also the scientific and technical progress, the XEVMPD format will need to be replaced by a new format, which is going to be based on the ISO IDMP and the HL7 messaging standard when these will be finalized. And in order to facilitate, of course, the implementation, a roadmap will be developed in consultation with the EU regulatory network and the European Pharmaceutical Industry Association. And the roadmap essentially will focus on the extension of the dataset to meet the agencies and the EU regulatory network needs. And it will take into account the EU input on Step 2 ICH implementation guide, which is forecast to be finalized in November 2012. Together with this, we will also address and cover the mapping of the XEVMPD against the ISO IDMP standard and the HL7 messages. We will also plan the migration of the legacy data in the future ISO-compatible system, and we will also prepare for the Eurovigilance audit. So I think this is my last slide. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ilaria. Just because we also have Sabine Brosch as the business leader with us today, so if you have questions, comments, feedback that you'd like to give, we have a few minutes, so the floor is open. Anybody who'd like to make an intervention? Please, go ahead.
Hi, Vicky Page-Clark for ProStracan and UCOPE. You may say that you're not able to answer, which is fine, but we've heard from our vendors for the regulatory database that there will be an additional fee in addition to any variation costs when submitting changes to EVMPD. I wondered if you were perhaps able to comment on that.
Yeah, in terms of how we are going to handle the variation, as mentioned earlier, this is part of the discussion that we are going to address in the near future. In fact, we are organizing a new workshop with the EU Industry Association. We are not aware or of any fee on variations at this stage. So.
And just to be crystal clear, fees charged by this agency are covered by the fee regulation. You'll remember the discussion this morning that we are hoping for new fees, which are probably going to be in 2014. But that is completely subject to a legal proposal from the European Commission. The Commission has published a timetable for that, which foresees adopting a proposal, hopefully by the end of the year. And ahead of that, or in the ignorance of what that will say, I think this just sounds probably like sort of corridor talk, actually. So I don't think, I can confirm we have no plans and actually no basis to introduce a fee of that type in the foreseeable future. Any other questions or comments, feedback? Please go ahead.
Growlire again, FP. Just a minor comment or whatever it is. You have one of the fields in the EVMPD that's not mandatory is the location of the master file. And I can say we discussed in our company and thought it was very nice and easy for authorities if they want to know the location of the master file, they can just look up the product in the EVMPD and see it. So why would they need a variation? I don't know if it's a reflection or a comment or whatever it is.
Sabine, do you want to, because there's been a lot of discussion on this point.
So if you follow the history, the location of the master file was in at the previous version when we published in July. Then it was removed, and the reason why we have removed it at that point of time was because at that point of time, so by 2nd of July, it is not yet mandatory to provide the location of the master file. So after the 2nd of July, once we start with maintaining the information on medicinal products, then we will introduce this as an information that should be provided. But as Ilaria has said, we are preparing a workshop, another workshop with industry associations to discuss that and then to bring that forward.
So just to be crystal clear, the data field is there. It's just not one that's listed as mandatory because it can't be mandatory because the implementation of the pharmacovigilance system master file will be between now and 2015. We fully agree, and the reason that it is a useful opportunity to be the reference source for the country of origin. Also, there's a legal obligation on the EMA to publish a list of the countries where the pharmacovigilance system master files are located. The obvious source for that list is the Article 57 data. And so the point is that what we want companies to do is to, when they do establish a pharmacovigilance system master file in the future, then when they next update the Article 57 database, then they would put it in because then it's a definitive reference source. Now, I know that there's also potential for administrative simplification here vis-a-vis variations and maintaining the actual marketing authorization dossiers. And that also is under discussion, what the opportunities might be. And I know the member states are very interested in the potential for marketing authorization dossiers to refer to Article 57 for further information, if you like. We haven't quite finished all of those discussions, but when they are mature, I'm sure we'll be putting it in a question and answer. Please, go ahead.
Emma Dufour for FPA. Can I just pick up on that last point you made? There's an implication in what you said, and I appreciate you can't confirm it, but can I just make sure I heard you correctly? Is it therefore a possibility that moving forward there may, as was outlined in the Q&A published yesterday or the day before, that there may need to be a variation initially to all marketing authorizations to put the summary of the pharmacovigilance system master file attached to each marketing authorization? One of the fields is the location, the other is the details of the QP, and then possibility that maybe subsequent to that, if changes are made, it could be made via the EVMPD database instead. If you could confirm if that is correct, and also is there any possibility of thinking beyond that, which I think possibly would be similar to the comment Grow made, that if we now moved after the 2nd of July when those fields are mandatory, do we really need to be doing this massive bulk variation at all to be updating all of these marketing authorizations where this information could be placed once?
Okay, so apologies for the colleagues that because this is quite an involved question. My understanding, Florin, maybe you can be my quality assurer, but there was a specific question and answer on this point in the document published 36 hours ago, which states that a summary does need to be in all marketing authorizations, which then will, if you like, support the fact that you've got a pharmacovigilance system master file maintained on site. Your point, I think, is okay. If you're going to have to vary all the marketing authorizations, if subsequently we find a way of simplifying this by cross-referring to Article 57, and you've had to vary all your marketing authorizations to put a summary in, is there a simpler way of doing it? To summarize, I think that's what you're saying. The problem is that we can't force companies to establish a pharmacovigilance system master file and therefore to also put a summary into the marketing authorization until the renewal or the deadline of 2015. All of the discussion has been about voluntary early implementation. The other point to reiterate is that the maintenance phase of Article 57 is still under discussion, and that's what the workshop, probably the third week of June, with the industry will focus on. So at this stage, what we are talking about is updating dossiers relating to summaries in a prospective way with the establishment of pharmacovigilance system master files. But I just want to make a pledge that we are actively discussing how we can make the most efficient system, making best use of Article 57 in the context of its interface with qualified person, inquiries for pharmacovigilance, country of location of pharmacovigilance system master file. So we're very open to these discussions, but obviously some of them will have legal interpretation points that we'll have to make sure that we've got really watertight before we give the final word.
If I may just come back quickly then, we would very much appreciate if you would give consideration to thinking about the fact that all companies at some stage in the next 3 years are going to need to make this change. Common sense would say if you make a single change, which then cross-references Article 57 EVMPD database, we're all in a better place. Obviously, that has a lot more conversation, a lot more discussion, a lot of legal considerations behind it. But if that could be one option, you at least look at the possibility of, I think that could lessen the burden, not just for industry, but for all regulators as well.
I think we hear you loud and clear. We take good note of your point, and we'll give very due consideration to it and discuss it with our legal advisors and the Commission and colleagues.